protections for the LGBTQ plus community, but most companies, good companies, do. Like, what are their protections there? Go look at what they're doing at the HRC, like best places to work. What are their ranking? Do they participate in those rankings? Do they have gender neutral bathrooms? Like, these are all questions that you should ask going in, because it is a very important decision. And there are like a myriad of companies out there that do all of these things exceptionally, Vanguard being one of them. But you do have to like do a little bit of digging to make sure you find the right one.
Thank you. Liana?
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing that I would add to that is it is a position of privilege to be able to do that sort of assessment, right? There are some folks who have to take a job and they don't have the ability to, turn a job down because of their job, because of their policies. And what I would say is, if you are in a position to be able to do that, you owe it to yourself and to others in the community to then be a voice for those who can't, right? So for instance, if you're, and I'm sure, Kim-Ann, you're doing this, like at Vanguard, from your bio, it sounds like you're not just doing your day job, you're then helping to inform the policies and the behaviors that then make that easier for other folks. And so whether you're doing that within your organization or you're doing that externally via, policy work or political support, or I think, you owe it to others, if you are in a position of privilege, to pick a job, where you can take that into account, to create an environment where other folks are able to walk into those environments, even if, because that is just the status quo. And that wasn't always the case. I think people had to step up and step in, and I think to some degree we've made such headway in our community that there's a belief that we can sort of take our foot off the gas pedal. And I don't think that's true. I think we've seen in the last 4 years just how tenuous a lot of these decisions are, and a lot of these policies. And so continuing to invest in that from positions of privilege, I think is really important. But I agree. I think if it's something that you are in a position to be able to assess, it is monumentally important that you do. I think, Kim-Ann's so right, particularly early on in your career, so much of your time is spent with your colleagues. They become your social circle. They become, your career trajectory is often informed by the people that you're working alongside, particularly early in your career. And so making sure that you're looking at the people you're going to work with as much as the work you're going to be doing, I think is monumentally important. I also think, making sure you ask those questions, because the more people are asking questions like, what are your policies? What does your representation look like? What are you doing to move those numbers? When corporate America has to answer those questions, that's when they start putting the behaviors in place to make sure that the answers are good. So, all of what she said, and with the addition that, don't make it only about yourself. Make sure that you're contributing to create an equitable environment for others who can't maybe ask those questions.
And Ivan.
Yeah, I mean, I think to add an additional layer to the wonderful things that you've already said, I do think it's also important to make sure that when you are looking for spaces that are going to allow you to be your most authentic self, that they're also challenging you in that. Find colleagues and find employers who are going to want you to continue to bring the best version of yourself. So, for example, I'm on a team now, and every few months we get together and we ask, okay, in what ways are you not being challenged? In what ways do you want to be challenged? And, where are the places that I can help you learn and grow? Because let's say you don't choose to stay with this team forever and you want to move on to the next team. You want to figure out how, where you are currently, you can leverage that for what you choose to do next. So, considering those are the people who, to Kim-Ann's point, you spend the vast majority of your time with, they're going to get to know you in ways that others in your life may not, because they're not working with you every day. So the people who get to see how you work on a team, the people who get to see, what your interests are and how you work best, whether you're someone who, likes to be a supporting role or likes to take the lead on a project, or you work better with just a little bit of jazz in the background, just the little things that make sense for you in the workplace. Those are all parts of the things that are important, I think, to consider when you're looking for a space that's both friendly to who you are and your identities, but also is going to help you grow and develop throughout your career.
All right, awesome. Thank you all. So the next question, going off of that one, did LGBTQA friendliness and or protections impact where you searched for jobs in terms of city, state, or geographical location? So this time around, I'd like to start with Liana.
I've always wanted to live in New York City. So, you know, for me, it was like New York or bust when I graduated, and then was there until 2 months ago. That being said, you know, my wife and I have had a lot of conversations across the last couple of years around, is this where we want to raise our family? And, you know, there are places in the US that were not on the list that may have been, were we a straight couple, you know? And so, you know, it's certainly part of the equation. I think it has to be. I think it's part of our reality in this community. Same goes for, you know, trips. There are places in the world that I would love to see that I'm just much more hesitant to go to, because I know that there are, you know, real risks associated with being an openly lesbian, you know, couple traveling to those places. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to some degree in a measured way, because like I said, New York has been for so long the bastion of openness and acceptance. But and I knew that's where I wanted to be. But as I've thought about expanding the circle, you know, that was a big part of it. It also probably kept me in New York longer because, you know, I have 2 young kids and I don't want them to be the exception. I want them to be in a community that values their experience. And in Brooklyn, that was like not a question. You know, we were certainly not in the minority as a lesbian, you know, couple. And so so that's something that we look at and we considered tremendously when we were looking to leave the city. Where could we go that would be a safe haven for us, but also a safe and supportive place for our kids to grow up. And it's small things, right? It's you know, it's things like teachers saying parents, not mom and dad. Like, you know, so there's the big stuff, which is the like concern for safety. And there are certain places where you have to be concerned for your safety, but it's also the little stuff like, you know, it can be really hard as a kid to grow up constantly having to be like, well, I don't have a mom and dad. I actually have 2 moms, and being in a position of having to explain that. And so having partners and teachers where I can call and say, hey, parents, you got to say parents, because, you know, I don't want him to feel left out. Though being in that kind of a community was really important to us.
Ivan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I can say that, you know, I think just based on the type of person I am, I generally prefer to be in a big city or very close to one. So when it comes to thinking about areas that may not be as friendly, it hasn't been as much of a concern for me, gratefully. But I have considered in the past if I wanted to move out of New York and, you know, where I might want to go. I think anytime that I considered a region that I didn't quite think may be the most comfortable, something that may give that region a point where a major city may not, is I might have family there. So, you know, if I did want to go somewhere that I felt I might need a little additional support because it may not be the exact environment that I'm looking for, making sure that I had people near me who I thought would be able to support me and help me advocate for myself in a new space were really important to me. And they're still important to me in this list that I make. Because even now, you know, you never know when you want to move, if you want to change your job, if you want to do anything. You know, the wind can blow and you're like, hey, I'd like to be somewhere warmer, which with the snow outside, I'm considering. But, you know, those are all things that I've thought about and saying, okay, well, if I go to this state or this city, do I have someone nearby that I can call on should something happen? Am I going to be completely alone? Those are all things that I've also considered when you are looking at issues of safety and other things of that nature.
Thank you. And Jeanette?
So I love that you asked this question, and I'm going to give somewhat of maybe what would be a surprising answer, which is I've lived in the vibrant, like Castro district of San Francisco. I lived there for 10 years. And I also spent 10 years in like the heart of the Bible Belt in Memphis and Nashville, Tennessee. And I can say that I found amazing, vibrant, welcoming communities in both areas. And I think that obviously San Francisco's a lot easier to find that community because you can literally step out your doors like and they're there. In Memphis, you got to search, right? But I feel like if you are committed to it, you can make any place home. Like I feel like that has been something that's foundational in my journey. And to be honest, part of my like career advancement is due in large part that I said like I can make home wherever. So if I get an amazing job opportunity and it's in Memphis, Tennessee, and I hate Tennessee, I'm still going to go and I'm going to try my best to make that work and experience that culture. And again, it's about also though, I did my due diligence. I made sure the company I went to work for, like, you know, was committed to LGBTQ. And like, I knew that I felt comfortable within those 4 walls. I went and spent time in the city. I went and searched out the gay bars. Listen, they were sparse in places, but they were still there. There was still a community there. I found other points of commonality. I found a soccer team. Like I did the things that made it, and I made them home. I would agree with Liana that like there came a point a few years ago where I'm like, I have a family now, and I didn't feel the most comfortable having them for some of the same reasons Liana said, right? But that was a personal choice, and also like it just coincided that I got a great job offer in a city that was super gay friendly, so that coincided. But it is what you make it, and don't prejudge a place. Like don't say no just because you think it's going to be bad. Like lean in, and sometimes it's good just to take a chance on something.
Awesome, thank you all. So for those of you who might not know, 22 states and DC prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Also, 24 states and the District of Columbia explicitly prohibit transgender exclusions. For anyone who would like to know more about the protective laws for LGBTQA folks in the US, please feel free to check out the HRC website and search for maps of laws and policies. So leading into my third question, actually, are there any specific resources you suggest graduating students explore, such as websites or other resources, when trying to find places to work/live that are LGBTQA friendly? So with that, I'd like to begin with Liana.
You know, I think Kim kind of mentioned some of these. Like, I think HRC's website is really very informative. I think it's, you know, particularly from a corporate perspective. So figuring out where your company falls. I think some of it is trying to find community. So, you know, and Khan is a great starting point. So I think if you're considering a new city, looking for alums in that region that you can hop on a call with and have a really honest conversation with is a great starting point. And then some of it is, you know, you just got to go, you know, like you said, Kim, you got to go and feel it out. You got to go and like walk into the gay bar, and does it feel like it could become a place you can hang out with friends? Is it, you know, when you're walking down the street, you know, does it feel safe to you? Do you feel welcomed? So I think it's a combination of, you know, traditional research and then connections, and then also just feeling out what you know, what feels like it could be home to you.
Ivan?
I think, you know, there are definitely a ton of websites, and starting with your network is honestly a great idea. I think another thing that, you know, I actually learned as I was out in the world dealing with different clients, but there are a variety of local orgs that are there for you. So if you are looking to move to a specific city, or if you know that you're looking for certain jobs and you want to know what their policies are, there are orgs out there that are both helping folks in the queer community find employment, and then there are also orgs that are helping folks find housing. So either of those is always a great route, and you know, their reach is expansive. Most of them exist in all of the states, and a lot of them also have connections overseas should you decide that you were moving out of the country for employment. So I think there are both websites, but also a lot of local orgs that are doing the grassroots work that tend to be great places to start. And you never know, that could also be where you find community in a new place that you move, in the event that you were worried about that. So I think there are a lot of options out there for folks who are looking.
Thank you. And Kim?
Yeah, I think that most of everything has already been said. I think there's a host of resources. Asking a lot of questions, I think, is really important. To Liana's point, I feel like one of the most powerful tools that you have about Connecticut College is a small, intimate community, and people feel a sense of connection to it many years removed. So like when I moved to San Francisco, I had never been to San Francisco. I didn't know a single person in San Francisco. I went on LinkedIn and I found other con graduates from San Francisco, and that was the very first connection I made there. And she helped me introduce her to her friends, and they introduced me to additional friends. And it was just a huge network out there. You know, like I can say, look me up if you're coming to Philadelphia, or you want to know about San Francisco, or you want to go to Memphis, like I'm here. Like I think that like that's one beautiful thing that we share as a community, the willingness to like come together and help each other out.
All right, thank you all so much. So as Liana said before, a great resource that you all can look at is the Working for Equality Index that is on the HRC website. So on this website, you can find the best places to work and a list of statements from employers that rated 100% on LGBTQA friendliness, and that is linked in the chat. So the next question, have you faced bias or discrimination in the workplace? If so, what advice would you give to people who may be experiencing bias in their places of work? So I'd like to start with Ivan.
So I can say that I've actually been fortunate enough to not experience bias or discrimination in the workplace. I have, while I can say maybe I'm still considered early in my career, but I have been really lucky. I've worked at places that were incredibly supportive of who I am and how I identify, and they've always kind of either helped me find resources that I needed or just been a shoulder if I needed one. So I can say that. But in the event that, that is something that happens in the workplace, I do think it's important to know what your resources are. So know who it is that you need to talk to should something happen, whether that's your supervisor, whether that's HR, whoever it is in your space. I think it's really important to, when you enter a new community and a new workplace, that you identify who those people are and figure out how they can help you and what they're actually responsible for helping you with. Because then once, should something happen, and we always hope that there won't, but should something happen, you kind of know where to start. And hopefully those people are able to help guide you through that process. And then I also think it's important to try to build supportive relationships with those that you have in the space with you. So, as we've said, you're going to spend a lot of time with your coworkers. Try to make friends, try to build a community there, try to see who's going to be an ally for you and, how can they support you through that if anything were to happen.
Kim Ann?
So sadly, my answer to this is yes. And it was a really painful time, but it was also a really pivotal moment in my life. So I, back when I was in San Francisco, I took a job at what was like a smaller boutique law firm in Oakland. So it was right over the bridge in San Francisco. So I assumed, to my detriment, that that would have been a gay-friendly organization. However, at the time, I was closeted at work. And that was a decision that I had made for myself at the time. And so I went in and I wasn't necessarily forthright, but I didn't like necessarily hide it, but it was just something I didn't talk about my personal life there. And then I was working there for about a year and I got a little bit comfortable and I made like friends with some folks. And I had a long-term partner at that time. And we were having a holiday party. And after going to all of these holiday events and all of these office events by myself, I said, I owe it to myself and to my partner to bring her to the event. And I did, and it was a disaster. And like the next, and I interviewed just as my friend because I was scared and I wasn't sure, but I think it was very clear what I brought her there for. And the next day, the managing partner of the firm sent out a company-wide email that said, no, quote unquote, friends allowed at company events. So it was abundantly clear what that meant. There were no other friends there except for my friend, which was my partner. And so my recommendation and advice is get out. I got out. It was the best. It was the hardest decision. I left without a job. It was the scariest decision. But I think Liana talked earlier, and I get it. Like that was a point in my life where like I didn't get to select the jobs. I'm fortunate enough now that I'm point in my career where I can select the jobs that I want. But I wasn't there. But what I realized at that moment was a few things, which was one, like, I am not going to sacrifice myself or the people I love for a paycheck. I will go work at McDonald's and be open and proud before I will work at a law firm and do that. Like, I'm just not going to do that. It's not fair to myself or the people I love. So don't do that. You do not have to do that. You will get another job. You're at Connecticut College. You are a talented individual. You can go find another job. Call me if that happens. We will find you another job. Secondly, don't hide who you are, because what happens if you hide who you are, you don't bring your full self to work, and like everybody can sense that you're hiding something. And so I didn't bring my best self to work because there was a huge portion of me that I was hiding. So I made that mistake never again. And every other job interview from that day is like, I'm gay. Like, you should know it. It's all over my resume, literally. Like, there is no hiding who I am because I don't want to ever find myself in that situation again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Liana?
Yes. So I actually have not experienced, what I have experienced is objectification. So I've experienced the like, oh, you're a lesbian, like, which is its own form of discrimination. So I wasn't worried about losing my job. I wasn't worried about being able to bring, a girlfriend to a party, and yet I was worried about bringing the girlfriend because I knew, the way certain and always men, white men in particular, were like looking at me and at us. And that creates its own sense of, you know, feeling uncomfortable. And I look back at myself at the time and think, I wish I'd been more brave. Like there's one colleague in particular who, this is going to sound like it doesn't make sense. Like he wasn't a bad person and he genuinely thought he was joking. And I wish I had had the bravery to say like, hey, not funny. Like not funny. We are colleagues. We work together. I don't, this is not an appropriate, you know, joking mechanism. So that's the way that I feel like I have experienced it. Again, though, could not agree more. Like that was in my, you know, my second job where I wasn't closeted, but I wasn't out. You know, I just didn't talk about it. And I have since never done that. I'm like the same as you can, like it is all over my bio, my resume, like, you know, I use pronouns on every public, like it is at minimum clear that I believe in these rights and literally, I mean, unless you don't read past the first 2 words, it's clear I am gay. And so, you know, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to just be really upfront from the beginning, because one, you know, you can read a room. And so in an interview setting, if that's going to be an issue, I know immediately. And I'm with you. I think there's, you know, there is no amount of money that will, that overcomes my personal sense of value. You know, and so I think for me, it makes it really clear when you're, you know, oh, you're not into this, cool, I'm not into you. And then the other thing I think that we really all need to be open about is when you are hiding part of yourself, or when you feel like you are being discriminated against, like your work product suffers. So you're not only doing yourself a disservice in real time, you're doing yourself a disservice long-term, because you know, you are not bringing your best work to the table, and it makes it a hell of a lot harder to continue to rise, you know, the ladder, if that is what you're interested in doing. And so, so I think the more you can be really upfront at the outset, the better it is for everybody. I think we often forget that an interview process goes both ways. So you should be interviewing companies just as much as they're interviewing you.
So just like Liana and Kim Ann said before, a great thing to note for all the students in the room is that as you are interviewing, you have the opportunity to ask about things like inclusive healthcare, discrimination policies, or adoption assistance. Should you feel comfortable doing so, or via online research, you might be able to get connected to an LGBTQIA affinity group if the company or employer has one. So thank you all for answering my questions. Now we'll be moving into the Q&A portion. Yes, I would like to open the floor to anyone in the audience who has questions. So yes, you can raise your hand. You can use the raise your hand function on Zoom, drop your question to the chat, message me personally, or unmute yourself. Oh, Jackie, do you have a question?
Yeah. First off, thank you guys. This was amazing. I'm the women's basketball coach. This is my 3rd year at Con, and wasn't planning on asking this, to be honest with you, but I have a couple members on my team who are part of the LGBTQ community, and a couple incoming recruits who are as well. And I was just curious, have you guys ever come and spoke to teams before? Because if you guys are up to that, I would love for you guys to talk to my team. That was amazing.
I actually just did a panel with the women's soccer team not too long ago. I will absolutely volunteer. I played basketball for 2 years at Con, but I was a terrible basketball player. So thankfully I blew my knee out, never had to subject myself to more there, but I'm absolutely delighted.
Awesome.
Same, I'd be so happy to chat with anybody.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you. James, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Wait, let me fix my camera. I apologize. Hi, my name is Jim Sachs, and I'm the principal at Clark Lane Middle School, about 3 miles from Connecticut College. I'm also a graduate, a class of 85, and my daughter's a graduate class of 2015. I love the school, and we have some art displays in our school. I also know Victor, who's on the line. His kids went through my school. So here's my question. It's an odd little question, but for past 8 years, I've worked really hard to support a GSA club that we have at our school, and it is really nicely populated now. We went to True Colors up at UConn the last few years. It is hard to do all of this in the pandemic. I've increased our LGBTQ population of teachers fourfold since I've been here. So I'm really proud of that. The thing I'm having a problem with still is breaking through with parents, because it's almost like parents are super afraid to bring the topic up in middle school. So we have clearly gay and lesbian teachers, we have a strong GSA, but it's like we can't talk about any of it because it upsets so many parents. So I'm wondering, from the point of view of people, college and past college, if you have any advice, or maybe I just have to wait it out. I don't know. I mean, we have the nice structures in place to make the kids feel welcome, but I feel like we can't talk about any of these topics with parents because they get so nervous that we're either indoctrinating or confusing, or I don't know, creating anxiety in their kids. And I actually think it's more healthy to just talk about all this stuff. But it's a weird position because I also don't want to push it so far that then the other things get overly focused upon that we've been successful with. You know, it's like this weird. So any advice would be nice.
I can't give any profound advice necessarily, but I do think it's amazing that there's someone like you that is thinking and about these things and asking these questions and so mindful for it. I feel like in my own personal life, I spent a really long time struggling with me coming out and like my sexuality with my parents. And along that journey, I had to realize to a certain extent that like I had grappled with my sexuality for a number of years, and like they were catching up in a certain sense. And so I be a little bit more patient with them. I don't think that if I had pushed them any harder, they would have gotten any faster there. I think they had to do it in their own due time. But I think that to me, what's most important is that you're creating a safe space and a respite for those kids. So if they have that at home, they know that they have their principal and their school and their classmates to support them. And to me, that's like the thing that's really going to be like life-changing for them. So I just love that you're asking these questions and having that journey. So
My oldest daughter is lesbian, and she went to Conn College, and she also has really pushed me and educated me on her issues that she's dealt with, not at Conn, but since being at Conn in the workplace. And she's got an awesome relationship. So I see all the aspects of it. And maybe I just should not expect parents of middle school kids to be, comfortable yet.
I think that's right.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Command.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a journey. My mom is like the queen of like the proud parents now, and she's awesome.
Right.
It was a journey, and she had to do it in her own time.
Yeah, and I think the thing about middle school kids is, I don't think most parents want to think about their middle schooler kissing anybody.
Right.
Independent of gender, like it's just,
Yeah,
and I've been so proud of and impressed by this younger generation. Like, I look back, there were so many kids in my high school who are now out and proud. And when I was in high school, nobody was gay. Like no one was gay, and now you look at high school kids and like there are gay kids who are coming out in high school, and that's just so not something that would have happened when I was coming up. And so we're making headway, but I think, to some degree with the parents, it probably has less to do with them, this idea of indoctrination, although I'm sure that there is a segment of the population that falls into that category, and more to do with, it's a really tenuous relationship with your kids at that age,
Yeah.
You're really careful. You don't want to, you can't ask too much about their friends because then they'll shut you out. And then there's this idea of like, who wants to talk to their parents about crushes and vice versa. And so I think it's probably a lot of other things at play. And I think to Command's point, like to create that space so that folks know there is a person or a group of people that they can speak to just even have, you know, GSA. I think it took me a really long time. Like I was just kind of very young for a very long time, which I don't regret, but I think had I been more aware that I was gay in high school, like, or middle school, like, to know that there were a bunch of kids who didn't think that that was awful and who would actually, you know, put their own names on the line as allies, I think would have been such a welcome message for me. So I think just continue doing what you're doing. And I'm not sure at your age that I would focus too much on, you know, getting the parents to be rah about it, and instead just focus on creating that safe space for the kids.
Okay, no, that makes me feel great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I want to add one
Yeah.
fact I realized when I talk about creating a safe space. The first person I ever came out to in the world was Ann Parmenter, who was my coach at Connecticut College, because she created that safe space for me. And so it is really important.
Can I just add one last thing, that when I was at Connecticut College in 1985, there was no one on campus that was gay, or at least that's what people thought. And here I am, it's 2021, and I'm able to ask people from Connecticut College advice that I need for my job. And it, you know, it really means a lot to me. So thank you.
I'll do you one better. In the class of 1999, not a single openly gay person in the entire school. And look at it now. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing how far we've come. So thank you all.
Thank you. It's really
You're welcome.
important work at that age, especially.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Professor Burley. You're muted.
Sorry. It's a good follow-up on James's question, if it's all right, and on things that have been said about Connecticut college classrooms. Thinking about the college classrooms as a place where you do learn to think critically, write succinctly, and argue respectfully, right? Are there specific to LGBTQIA kinds of lessons learned that we should be cultivating in the classroom? Like best practices for teachers that would really foster community that is both specific and then broadly enriched. Thank you.
I mean, for me, it's history. And I think this is true, you know, for racial justice work and LGBTQIA, like, you know, the history that we are taught growing up is not representative of, you know, the reality, right? And so there are so many heroes that we just don't ever learn about. And I think creating opportunities to tell a more fulsome story of how we got to where we are today, I think is something that, like, as I reflect on my time in con, like, you know, and I had, so by the time I was there in 2001 to 2005, there were folks who were out, and I dated, I had my first girlfriend my sophomore year and dated girls the whole time, and it was never an issue. So it was a very welcoming environment, and yet it was not an environment that necessarily kind of proactively created space for me to know more about that history. And so I think as we think about government, you know, and I think that can be across multiple departments. So, you know, in the government, in government classes, like learning more about policies globally and the way that different, you know, different countries handle these things. And even in the US, like there are so many people who don't recognize that you can be fired in most states because you're gay, right? Like, and so being able to make that education part of the central education versus something that folks have to work to learn, I think just creates a more empathetic, more connected community. And so that's the thing that jumps out to me.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a part of creating a classroom space that encourages learning about history and things that we don't always really get the space to learn about is also creating easy comfort pieces. You know, I think something that I valued either at my time at Con or even now as I get my master's, you know, the professors who just normalize talking about pronouns, for example. You know, it's very common as a trans man that I get misgendered. So that's something that, you know, when I'm in a classroom and a professor says, hey, this is my name, I'm Professor so-and-so, my pronouns are X, X, and X, it encourages a classroom discussion around pronouns. And then everyone has now had an opportunity to, if they desire, share their pronouns. And it creates that sort of normalization of, okay, everyone identifies how they identify and it's your choice to do so. So, you know, I think little things like that can be helpful in ways in which faculty are very open and transparent about their own identities when they're comfortable can also create comfortable spaces for students as well. Like, you know, sometimes I've had faculty use their own lives as examples in class. And sometimes, you know, the example you might think of, oh, my dog, you know, did something weird the other day and that was funny. But then it's also comforting when a faculty member says, yeah, you know, my partner and I did X, X, and X. And, you know, this sort of language that creates a space for students to then say, yes, and I did this with my partner and I had these experiences. So ways in which that we can speak to each other and just kind of generally create a comfortable conversation around different things without making people feel like they have to initiate it, I think are great ways too.
I like have to agree, Ivan, it's so perfectly stated. I think that like you can't underestimate that like professors are probably the first person, adults, that like kids and their first like, you know, moments of independence and finding themselves not underneath their parents, like they look to you and like you can play a profound role in that. I think you all already realize that. But when you think about maybe like the underlying heteronormative things that you do, like how that could like isolate or alienate somebody like in more profound ways than you might expect. And that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect on it, because like you never will be. Like the other day, our 7-year-old like found a grasshopper, and they said, you think it's a girl or a boy? And he was like, maybe it's an X. And I'm like, yes, you're totally right. I'm such a jerk. Like I'm learning those things. But it's like also about admitting the fact that like I'm not perfect and I'm still figuring it out, and like help me learn, and like I'm teaching you, but you can also teach me, and I'm working on this journey. And I think showing that sort of vulnerability and showing that like you're trying goes a really long way.
And I also, I would add to that representation. Like, I think one of the things I love that James said is that he increased the teachers fourfold, like making sure that the professors at Con are representative of the broader world, because it's one thing to create safe spaces. It's a hell of another thing to look up and see people who look like you. And so I think having more of that, pushing, you know, the administration to make sure that as you're bringing on new professors that, and staff and, you know, administration across the board, that there is, you know, those voices are also in the room when decisions are being made, when curriculum is being established, when, you know, it's because even somebody who's really well-intentioned, if it isn't part of their daily life, you know, we'll miss things, you know, like you just said, Kim Ann, like there are things that we are in the community and we still miss. And so I think making sure that you're pushing that representation across the board is really important too.
I would also like to add, for any like faculty and staff who are like interested in trying to find more ways to make their classroom more LGBTQIA friendly, there's also the LGBTQIA Center as a resource. Reaching out to Erin Duran, the Director of Gender and Sexuality Programs, is another great place to start. Are there any other questions that anyone has? If not, I would like to offer a question kind of connected to the other questions that we had before. Specifically, again, with the workplace. If an LGBTQIA coworker is faced with bias in the workplace, what do you recommend allies do in this situation? And I would just kind of like to open this up to any of the alum who would like to answer.
I mean, I think a great place to start is to be an active support. You know, I think a lot of times allies will say, hey, I'm there for you, whatever you need, you know, just call on me. And that's a moment to call, you know, that's the moment where it shouldn't have to say, hey, I'm tapping you in here. I'd like you to step in and provide a little extra support. I think being very active in what you choose to do in that moment, whether that's saying, hey, actually their pronouns are X, X, and X, or, you know, hey, that's actually not an appropriate thing to say. Why don't we talk about that? Or whatever the situation is, I think as an ally, you have way more agency than you give yourself credit for. And I think you can definitely step in and say something, do something that helps take the pressure off the situation and gives, you know, whoever the incident was targeted at, it gives them an opportunity to kind of step back out of the situation, because it can be really uncomfortable if something's happening to you. To in the moment you're trying to both, you know, protect yourself and how that may have triggered you in different ways, and also be respectful of the fact that you're at work. And also, you know, there's so many different things that come into play that I think as an ally, if you can really physically step in and say or do something, that is my personal opinion what would be the best way.
Yeah, I'd love to add, like, I feel like you have to say something. So this is one of the things that like allyship, like especially at Vanguard, we have our LGBTQ plus group, and it's like 80% allies, right? Which is fantastic, right? You love allies. And we teach a lot about what allyship is. And like, first off, like my first thing is like, you don't get a gold star for not being a homophobe. Like that doesn't get you anywhere, right? So like we should all like, that would be the standard, right? But if you're going to call yourself an ally and you're really going to be an ally, it's time that you stand up in those hard moments and fight for the people that you were there for, like to fight for, and the people you claim to be an ally for. So I'm going to use like a quick example. On Facebook a while back, I got into this big heated thing that like I can't like give up a Facebook fight. If somebody says something like racist or homophobic, I know I shouldn't get involved with it, but I always do. And so it got really heated, and people were saying some really terrible things, not only attacking like my sexuality, but also attacking my race. And it was a profoundly hurtful thing. And somebody, a few people, but one in particular reached out and was like, and for something, everyone was silent, right? Everybody's attacking me from left and right, and all of my like allies are silent. And one of them sent me a private Facebook message, which is like, I just want you to know that like I am here to support you, and I see what's going on, and that's so tough. And honestly, no thank you. That does not help me, okay? Because you see me getting my ass kicked out there, and like you should have helped me. Like if I walked by and I saw a bunch of kids beating up your kid, and afterward, and I watched it happen, and I walked home and called the parent and said, hey, I saw Johnny or whatever get beat up today. I'm really sorry. I want to know I'm here for you. I think any parent would be like, well, why didn't you stop it, right? So like being an ally is like in those moments doing something and like taking the stop position and sticking up for that person. And I feel like if you do it behind closed doors, I don't need that. Like I don't need your help, because that's not being an ally.
And I think you have to remember in those moments, like, you know, you feel uncomfortable. Well, that person feels 100 times that uncomfortable every minute of every day, right? Like that is a thing we carry, like the microaggressions and so, yeah, you gotta like allyship is a verb, not a descriptor. So it's like not an adjective. So it's like, let's just, you know, you can't be an ally. You have to act as an ally. You know, that's what you have to do. And this is what I was saying at sort of at the top of the hour is like, you know, you gotta show up when you're in a position of privilege and power, because you can afford to do it. You can afford to do it more so than the other folks, and also those other folks are tired. We're tired, you know. So take some of that off. And so yeah, I think that's you got to show up in really meaningful ways. And by the way, I also think you have to show up when it's not hard. Like showing up is a consistent thing. So like you should show up when there's the Facebook fight, but like show up when there's nothing going on and like come up with new ideas and, you know, like be constantly thinking about this. Like if this is something you've decided you care deeply about, don't care deeply every 4 years when we're voting for a new president, or don't care deeply only when something terrible happens and we've killed, you know, a bunch of trans Black women and you're going to like post about it on social media. Like show up every day, all day, figure out how you can do that effectively, right? Everybody has different roles. Some folks are going to give money. Some folks are going to volunteer at the front lines. Everybody has a different role. And I don't think you have to do it all, but I think you have to figure out what are the things I care about? And then what lane can I swim in to help actually enact change?
That was great. Thank you all so much. I'm going to ask another question, but again, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to DM, raise your hand or anything like that. My next question is, as we kind of touched on before, how have you found community at your places of employment or within your field? And do you have any advice for LGBTQIA students on how to build community or how to connect with colleagues? And yes, anyone can.
I'll always talk, but I always go first. I feel bad. I'll say, and I think we've said it a few times, like create your community and like bring your best authentic self to work. I feel like, and I say best because people sometimes bring authentic self, but like you bring your best, like I'm at like a theater self to work. Like you always have to sort of like calibrate to your audience. And I think that's an important thing that people have to learn. But just be yourself, be proud of who you are. Like I got married 3 days ago and like I told everybody at work and I was like, yeah, this is a thing. And and thank you. And it was a beautiful thing. And I felt like it was beautiful that I was able to share it. I think that so many people responded like, oh, I feel that's so wonderful that you feel comfortable sharing. I'm like, everybody should like, I should be able to share. It's no different. And like, I just think it's just, you gotta like cultivate that, because the other thing is that like, if you do it, somebody else will feel confident doing it, and somebody else, and it does create sort of that momentum. And it starts with one person. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think for me,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, Ivan. No, you go.
Oh no, go ahead. You can go ahead.
No, I feel like you've talked less. Go.
I was going to say, yes, definitely that. It starts by building community in one place. And I think as someone who is kind of transient on teams, just based on the nature of the work that I do, I take community with me everywhere I go. So whenever I really connect with someone and, we've built a great relationship, now that person's in my corner. So no matter where I go, I can always call on them, whether it's a current workplace, a past workplace, I can say, hey, this situation happened, or I'm thinking about this. Do you have any tips based on your experience? And you also get to be a connector between people. You never know when you're going to meet someone who is searching for a specific type of community that you have access to or that you're a part of. And now you can share that. I think community is one of those things that is up to us to create, and we have a lot of agency in how that's presented when we go places. So between me collecting my different contacts and building a network of people, I'm always able to then, if I meet someone who isn't necessarily as far along in their journey as I may be, I could say, hey, you know what, you should really talk to this person. They'd love to connect. They're always looking to mentor someone, whatever the case is. And you can really kind of spread this sense of community. So I think it's not just up to finding and joining community, but also creating it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think I'd say two things to that. I think one, also in line with creating community, don't be afraid to ask folks for time, and you're going to hear no, like there's this one con alum who is incredibly successful. And I remember about 5 or 6 years ago, I sent her an email and was like, can I just pick your brain for 30 minutes? And she said no. And I remember being really hurt by it. And actually, ironically, we were at a very intimate dinner that night that we both got invited to, which was very awkward for both of us. Maybe her more than me, but I look back on it now and think that was totally okay. I was grateful that she was incredibly successful and took the time to respond to me. And if I could go back to my younger self, I shouldn't have taken it personally. It's just, she's really busy, and she took the time to respond and say, I'm so sorry, I'm too busy. I can't actually give you what you deserve. Best of luck. But don't let that then stop you from asking other people. Right. And so I think when you see someone that you feel like you could learn from, or that you would benefit from connecting to, go ahead, and it can be incredibly vulnerable, but ask the question, ask if you can connect. And then don't take it personally if they say no. The other thing that kind of comes to mind as you ask that question is, I think as my career has, matured, I need the community at work less. I have a deep community at home and kids, and, whereas that was a big part of my social and professional life, it has become less so. So I think for me, one of the things that I really focus on now is just really purposeful interactions. So some of the things we were talking about before, like I said, having my pronouns placed, creating space for other folks to see it, and to normalize things that may be scary for other folks to sort of step into. So that's where I see sort of, and then creating safe space for others to build community who need it more. Whether that's by being an executive sponsor, or fighting the good fight for something that folks want that they're maybe don't feel senior enough to fight for. So I think community evolves over the course of a career, and I think that's totally okay to need different things at different points. But I think figuring out where you can have the most impact is at least how I like to think about it.
Thank you. And I would like to offer up this last question. Is there any advice that you would like to share with the graduating or recently graduated students preparing to go into the workforce?
I loved what Kim Ann said earlier, you will get a job. You will get a job. And I think that that's important because it empowers you to not settle. I remember, I don't come from money. There was no one to save me. If I didn't have a job, or if I lost my, nobody was going to help me pay my rent. And I think, that puts you in a bit of a position of fear, where you sort of take things that maybe are not exactly what you want to be doing. And, you know, I think if you can believe enough in yourself to know that like you will be fine, it opens you up to pursue things that you're really passionate about and to wait for the right thing. And I think then that just sets you up for greater success long term.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think, you know, I was so grateful for the resources that Khan gave me to help me get my first job. And when I didn't like it and we weren't a good fit, I just quit. You know, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing. I quit and I was like, I will figure out the next thing and it will be okay. And I think that's also a place where, again, going back to community can be helpful. You know, having people in your corner who you can say, listen, I just did something really scary. I quit my job. I have no idea what my next move is, but there are people there who can say, hey, listen, you've got this. You're going to get another job. You know, reach out to someone to review your resume, figure out, do the things that you can do. Look at what's within your power to do right now, whether that's update your resume, practice your interview skills, you know, continue to network because you might run into someone who is hiring and they might know someone who's hiring. You know, continue to reach out to people and look for what you want while you're waiting, because at some point something will come along and you'll get that opportunity that you really want. But it's okay, everything will work out. And you know, you have communities like Khan. You know, I think I love where I'm going for my master's, but I think you know, between the institutions I've been involved in, something that I think Khan is really special in is our sense of community. You know, we're a really small school. When you go to Khan, you pretty much know everyone who was there while you were there. And those are all people that, whether or not you were the best of friends, I'm sure you can call on them and they will say, hey, you know what, I do know someone who's hiring, or I do know someone you can get in touch with who can review your resume, or here, why don't you reach back out to the Office of Career Services and they'll review your resume. You know, there are so many different ways and resources, and, you know, Khan's alumni network is vast and it's, you know, everyone is incredibly successful and always willing to help. I have yet to encounter an alum at an event who didn't have some sort of positive word of encouragement about where I was going next in life. So I think, you know, you guys got this.
I like a lot of what they said. I've said it a million times, be your authentic self. That to me is the most important thing. Like you everybody loves somebody who is like authentically themselves. It's like a very attractive quality in a person. And you might think that like that might be off-putting. Like it was hard for me to bring my sexuality to work because I thought that it might be off-putting or might alienated. But I was actually alienated until I did it. And that like because people saw me and I brought the best version of myself and then worked harder and created a better work product. I love what Liana said about like you will find a job. Like you will find a job. Like everything will work out. When I was in law school, I plastered an entire room with rejection letters from law firms. And now I'm a very successful person. And like, it was a very depressing time, but like things can dramatically change. There's been times in my life where I found myself without a job and thinking like, nothing's ever going to get better. And like, I was quite like, it'll work out. Like you will work out. You're a strong, capable people. It will work out. And then the last thing is build relationships. I feel like that's the most important thing. Like, and I can never stress it enough. Like, you will make mistakes in life. You are never going to always be the smartest person in the room. Sometimes you might be the dumbest person in the room, but like, you can always be the nicest person in the room, and everybody wants to forgive the nicest person in the room. Everyone always wants to work with the nicest person in the room. Right. And so like I tell everybody on my team, like be a golden retriever, like be that person that's happy to come to work, that you're smiling when you're around. And like that brings a lot of joy in life to the world, and people want to surround themselves with that.
All right, that officially closes the Q&A portion. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for the alum, Liana, Kiman, and Ivan. Thank you so much for all your insight. And yes, really appreciate everything you said. So with that, have a good day, everybody.